just maturing from what is certainly that allure, that startup company. It's got a sexy ring to it, to a much more like, say, acting like and looking like and operating like a much more established company.
One, two, three.
Coming up, we're talking food waste again, but with another startup, another ad tech company, Verdant Technologies. We're talking to their Chief Revenue Officer, Matthew Aronson. The Modern Acre podcast explores the latest in business, investing, technology, and sustainability in agriculture, and we're your hosts, Tyler and Tim Nuss. If you'd like to dig deeper with the Modern Acre, check out our membership community, the Modern Acre Co-op. The Modern Acre podcast is presented by American Ag Credit. American Ag Credit is a proud member of the Farm Credit System, which was created more than 100 years ago with the sole purpose of serving the financial needs of farmers and ranchers. From small farms to the largest agribusiness enterprises, American Ag Credit understands agriculture and how to structure customized financial solutions. Just like many of the guests we have on the pod, American Ag Credit recognizes that the evolution of agriculture is inevitable and exciting. Their goal is to be at the forefront of this evolution, partnering with producers to grow their future in ways they haven't imagined yet. To learn more about American Ag Credit and to receive exclusive access to reports from Terrain, a research and insights service of American Ag Credit, visit agloan.com/terrain or check the link in our show notes. Huge shout out to our new presenting sponsor this quarter, American Ag Credit. We have used American Ag Credit on our farm, and they're really an innovative finance institution. We had Matt Wolf on the podcast previously from Terrain just to talk about the California ag market. This is a value add service they provide to their customers. We'll link that episode in the show notes, but if you haven't checked them out, if you have financing needs, check them out, American Ag Credit. The link is in the show notes. We're super happy for them to be sponsoring the show over the next few months.
I hope everyone has awesome plans for the 4th of July. Ty and I are not going to be together. First time in a couple of years. You came up early this year. Timing didn't work out to be up here on the 4th, which I'm bummed about, but we got some good family time a week ago having you up to Lodi.
Yeah, we did. And I think it's worth mentioning now that we had some nice pool time at kind of like a community pool with our daughters, playing around and enjoying the pool in the hot Lodi heat. And as we typically do when we're together, I challenged you to a physical competition. If you guys recall, we did a big fitness challenge last year on the pod publicly. I was ranked the fitter brother. And then over Christmas, Tim, I challenged you to a plank off, and you beat me in that one. So you got some glory back. You took the crown, so to speak. And so, when we were hanging out in the pool, I challenged you to a race of the length of a pool, full size pool, people. And we did a race, and it doesn't honestly matter who won. The funniest thing was we do this race, we get done. It was a photo finish. I beat you by 0.1 seconds. The lifeguard, we didn't ask the lifeguard to do it. She timed us. And then our wives were we get up from racing. Who won? It was Tyler by a hair. We look up, our wives are their mouths are dropped of what did we just witness? We have never seen you move like that. We were going so fast. I don't think they knew we had it in us. We could have been competitive swimmers, Tim.
Yeah, we could have been competitive swimmers. It was pretty funny. We were both going all out. I hadn't swam freestyle in forever, but once the competitive juices start flowing, we were getting after it. So I think they were pretty shocked at the results.
It's crazy how competition can, alignment of incentives, right? It's you want the glory, you're going to go all out. But I think I have the crown now, Tim, until you challenge me to the next challenge.
Yeah, next time we get together. Do other families do this, Ty? I feel like every time we're together, it's some ridiculous challenge of who can throw the ball farther or do something better than the other one.
It's always got to be like spur of the moment. It's just like, okay, we're doing it now. There's no warm up, no nothing. Like this is it.
Yeah, no warm up is probably a great idea as we get older, just to
as we age.
Heavy physical activity.
All right, guys. Well, let's get into this conversation. Tim, we talked to the chief revenue officers of Verdant, who's also similar to Appeal we talked to last week, focused in the post-harvest shelf life extension space. And it was really interesting just talking to them and kind of getting a counter to how Appeal is approaching it, how they're approaching it.
Yeah, super fun chatting with Matt. Matt and I worked together at Appeal for a number of years and have become friends. So it was awesome to have him on talking about. He joined Verdant a couple of years ago, really to help them get their product commercialized. Like he really thrives in small teams and startups, really going from 0 to 1, kind of in that type of a culture. They're taking a different approach to Appeal, focused more on protective coatings and inserts. And so they have a different mode of application, but really targeting the same space. So it was great chatting with Matt about their product roadmap on what they're really focused on. Their core crops are broccoli, cucumbers, tomatoes, and peaches. So everyone's kind of taking their angle on like what crops are best fit for their technology and really starting there. So it's cool talking about their business.
Let's jump in with what's top of mind for Matt.
Top of mind for me, I'm going to save the macroeconomics, market dynamics. Those I try not to worry about things I can't control. I think there's one, maybe two things. I think from a day-to-day work perspective, I think the thing that I find myself thinking about a lot is this. I'm going to call it like a tension between balancing the near-term growth with, for us, the need, and a lot of companies like us, the need to build long-term customer trust and satisfaction. So that tension between those two, and I think that's just part of what's been for us, like this transition from a startup company to a more established, sustainable business. But I mean, the challenge is there, and hence the like top of mind or up at night. Everything, resource allocation, but also just like I'm gonna like innovation pressure. Like, how do you kind of still keep the foot on the gas and continue to innovate while like focusing on execution, and through all of that, just like maintaining, culture, mission and values. I think that's very front of mind or top of mind for me. I think the other thing too, and I think you guys can probably appreciate just how to just be all in for the team while also like showing up as a new dad. That's something that I'm not going to suggest I have a great playbook myself, but it's something that I think about a lot, and I find myself talking with folks, kind of picking their brains.
A lot of great thoughts there, Matt. I think that's a really good thing you pointed out of like when you're working for kind of an earlier stage company that's getting to commercialization, like how do you balance like wanting to show kind of that growth in the quarter and like having kind of growth in the near term, but also building for the long term, and finding that balance, I think, is a challenge that a lot of startups face, where they want to prove that they're doing right by their investors and they're seeing the upside there, but also making a product that's going to be scalable and be able to be commercialized for the long term. And excited to kind of dig into that more. But before we jump into Verdant, the business model and everything going on there, let's take a step back, learn a little bit more about you and what led you into agriculture.
Yeah, and maybe this is the case for others as well. I feel like I'm going to say like unconventional path. I think, for me from, early days, for me, my background, there was like a very, like, let's say a series of crossroads. I've been in this ag tech space just the last 10 years, but, if I really rewind the clock, I mean, there were these like kind of forks in the road for me, everything early on from like STEM, versus music, or, energy or policy, or, job or grad school. Just kind of these crossroads that for me, I'd be lying to you if I told you, the end goal is ultimately land like here in food and ag. But I'm grateful to have, ended up here. And it was, to make a long story short there, I was in grad school kind of towards the end of my PhD in Santa Barbara. And this was in engineering, and kind of got the call from a guy who I'd done research with and had, surfed with and developed relationships. He was like, hey, you want to, join this startup company that happened to be in ag called Appeal Sciences. And long story, short, I jumped ship from the PhD. I think probably surprised some folks, maybe not all, but I'll never forget my dad, who I got a lot of respect for, and he's an engineer himself. I remember when I kind of shared with him what I was thinking, and gave him a tour of kind of the post garage office at the time, and got dinner with him that night in Santa Barbara. I'll never forget. And I just asked him, like, what do you think? Kind of expecting the list of like why this would be a terrible decision. But in fact, his response, which was so empowering and honestly such a gift, was, I think if you don't pursue this opportunity, you'll regret it the rest of your life. And it just like, for him, knowing him and the respect, it was, again, such a gift. And that for me then was like the start of jumping into ag. Here I am, like, calling in, talking to you guys. I live on a vegetable farm now. So again, a lot has changed. My wife, she is very much the brains and muscle behind our operation. I'm just the occasional farmhand, but stumbled into this space like 10 years ago. Not looking back. It's just learning curve after learning curve. But now I'm surrounded by vegetables at home, like, all the time. So I can't escape it, even if I want to.
That's awesome. I love that story about your dad. And that's, one of those turning points, I think, in a career, in a life, really, right? Is hearing from someone you respect and admire, giving you that push is super, super cool. All right. So you jump into ag, you're a hippie farmer now, just kidding. And you started Appeal, you're at Verdant now. There's a lot of, I think, crossover and overlap there in this kind of concept of food waste. It's been, a huge talking point, buzzword, if you will, since we've started this podcast, of this huge issue of food waste. And people are trying to tackle it different ways. And how do we do it? And there's different technology, there's different kind of operating models associated with food waste. So I'm just curious, like, zooming out about food waste, how do you think about that problem, being at Appeal and now being at Verdant? And we can get into how Verdant's, attacking it specifically. But food waste, what comes to mind?
Gosh, this for me, I think for a lot of people, wasn't even on the radar. Years ago, I think back, it was maybe 2012. I think some articles called Wasted, this big kind of report or article that I think with that, and soon thereafter, it really kind of put food waste on the map. More in vogue. It's almost like you talk to a random person out at the bar, and they could almost quote or cite 30 to 40% of food is wasted. And not saying it's okay, but I think there's more, familiarity with, this as an issue. And I think still trying to figure out what are those solutions, So it's been a journey, I know, for me, just kind of understanding like the scope of the problem and what are the potential solutions. I mean, here we are, talking. I think your question, Tyler, is very fitting. Just a couple weeks ago, really excitingly in the U.S., kind of jointly between the USDA, FDA, EPA, released officially our national strategy for reducing food loss and waste and recycling organics, where the goal is to reduce food loss and waste by 50% by 2030. So, a lot, I think, has led to this moment, and here we are talking about it. So I think there's that as a backdrop, which is exciting. And then I listen, no matter what technological solution you're talking about, I think, I look at thought leaders in this space, whether that's ReFed or other, organizations, nonprofits. And a lot of that analysis points to, like, yes, there are definitely room for technological solutions, but there's no silver bullet. And furthermore, and this took me a while as like a proud engineer to admit, that solutions maybe like ours are necessary, but nowhere near sufficient. Like if you look at the kind of preventative type solutions, some of the ones at the top of the list in terms of most impact are things like just consumer education, or like figuring out this whole Best Buy date, stamp, things like these that don't need a patent or technology, but that really move the needle. And I think technology plays a role, but I think it's that education piece. And honestly, that's a big part of what we're doing, educating people on our product, how it works. So that's very much part of the work we're doing at Verdant. And I imagine a lot of others in this space as well.
Yeah, let's dig into Verdant a little bit. Maybe talk to us about why you made the move, and talk to us about Verdant's technology and how it's kind of differentiated in the space. There's a few different kind of approaches with food waste, whether it's coatings in the packing house, if it's inserts into produce or modified atmosphere bags or coatings. So maybe just talk to us about your product and business model.
Yeah, for sure. I've been out at Verdant. It's crazy. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but post-COVID, I just feel like time is such an enigma. I mean, it's been like 2.5 years that I've been at Verdant, and Verdant. I I would describe it's really been an organization, a company, kind of 20 years in the making, in its current form, around for the last like 3 to 4. So the origin story, goes back, gosh, like early 2000s, kind of born out of what was a private company in the Midwest, and dealing with kind of their own issues and their, parts of their business with food waste as like a distributor. And so, they looked at some patents and technologies, and anyways, a little bit of a skunkworks team. They're kind of born out of that was the early makings of Verdant. That wasn't the company name at the time, but fast forward to 2021, Verdant was acquired by our now parent company, Gulf Tech International, and kind of around that time started to take on more like the Verdant. And then the product that we sell to the market, HarvestHold. So we've really been kind of in the market just for the last 3 to 4 years. And, Tim, Tyler, I mean, for me, leaving Appeal, joining Verdant at the time, I mean, it was a tough decision, just like any kind of closing any chapter. But for me, I learned that and found for myself, like my heart was really with, kind of companies at that startup phase. Like I love to build things. I think that's just the engineer in me. So joining a smaller team that was still very much in that building phase, and also staying in this space. I mean, it's a space that I had grown to love, and I felt like I wanted to be able to apply some learnings and still make some impact in this space. And I think lastly for me, the other thing that kind of juxtaposing the two, or why making that move, was it was an opportunity joining the team more in a commercial role, as opposed to previously when I joined in a technical role. So that's just kind of been part of a natural evolution of my own career, and that got me to Verdant. But I mean, I think, Tim, you asked like what, what are we doing in kind of the nature of our product and technology? I think, for us, I like to describe our product as a new spin on an old technology, which, I think generally speaking is an interesting framework for innovation. That is, application of existing tools or technology, applying them in different ways, using them in like seemingly tangential industries. In our case, it was an old, even off-patent technology that had been used like for decades in apples, let's say, but coming up with a different delivery method that really importantly made it easy to use, more, let's say, easy to integrate in the supply chain of different commodities. So it was really an unlock. And if you think about the product, think like paper towel roll, like you might have in your kitchen back at home. We manufacture this product in a form of a roll. You tear a sheet off and put it in the box. And it's really, in a nutshell, the simplest in-box solution to extend the shelf life of fruits and vegetables, and even the base life of flowers. And again, it's this product that's been used for years, that blocks ethylene. So it's great for ethylene sensitive commodities. And so broadly speaking, that I would say our secret sauce, there's a lot of great material science behind it, is printing a gas on a substrate. And right now that's manifesting itself in a product that's, quite useful for shelf life extension for different types of fruits and vegetables.
I love the idea of a business starting from something like this, right? It's like, hey, we identified there's this off-patent technology that we think we could leverage for, another use case, and kind of build on top of that. I love origin stories like that. So super cool. I mean, talk to us about, this is the kind of like the $1 billion question, I think, in this general space, is how do you make money doing this? Who pays for it? And kind of talk to us about that.
I suppose it is, kind of the big question. I think for us, our go-to-market approach, which obviously that question is very central to for us, I would characterize as a very measured customer-first approach. I think for us, it's really, this mantra of, really being everything to someone, as opposed to stretching ourselves too thin and kind of taking that something to everyone approach. And so I think, how do we make money? I mean, listen, my role, my team, it's really overseeing that entire customer life cycle. And I think to make money, to be profitable, to have any sort of a sustainable business, whether you're a shelf life extension technology or, whatever the case may be, I think it's really important, we found, to be very solution oriented, having, that is like solving a real tangible problem with like clearly definable success metrics and criteria. I think if you do that, you've got a fighting chance to kind of prove it out. I think you've got to be willing to roll the sleeves up and do that and build trust. I think, what do they say? People do business with other people they know and they like and they trust. So I think especially in this industry, you guys know, highly relational in this produce industry. I think you've got to be to drive towards profitable growth for your business as a solution provider. I think you've got to be willing to roll the sleeves up and build that trust. I think to do that, we've leaned on third-party validation, putting our product in the hands of different universities and other collaborators. And again, working with partners, some of these early adopters, with our eye on, clearly defined problems and success criteria. I think if you do that, you've got a fighting chance to come out on the other end where all parties feel like there's value kind of created. And so it's the journey we're on. And I think we've had some examples of successes that I can share where it gives me, reason to believe that we might be on the right track.
Yeah, it's such an interesting space because there's value being created by being able to extend the shelf life, and you're kind of the middleman in between the retailers that are traditionally buying those commodities and the suppliers, growers that are producing them. And every different supply chain is different on how that value is distributed. So it almost takes a very kind of bespoke, nuanced approach to how you monetize business models like this, because it's not the same in every instance.
Yeah, you're totally right, Tim. I mean, and that's a little scary, if you're talking to investors or others that, maybe outside looking in, but words like bespoke and customized, tailor, you want to go for drive like the standardization, because with that comes efficiency and et cetera. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that's a trap that, to square peg, round hole it. And I think that's just, I mean, in the most wonderful sense, Mother Nature, I think just looking at different commodities and kind of their supply chains differently. And I think that is a lot of the discovery work that we've been like deep in over the last few years. So I think, again, Tim, you're spot on. I think, that manifests itself in a lot of ways for us, how we partner, whether it's a kind of more direct sales with certain produce commodities, working, very directly and transacting with the growers of different commodities. I think we've certainly also found ourselves engaging with folks on more of the kind of buy side retailers and food service for other commodities, just given the nature of that supply chain. Broccoli is a fantastic example of that. And then flowers too, where we've actually worked like a more indirect model with a distributor from a go-to-market standpoint. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag there, but I think that, for any solution provider in the space or anyone growing a mix of different commodities, I think you know well that a one-size-fits-all approach is likely not going to be successful.
Circling back to where you started, Matt, like how are you balancing the idea of growth and investing in product and getting to be a profitable, sustainable business, like you mentioned? Like, how are you doing that right now? What's the answer to that question for you right now?
Yeah, I think, Tyler, a big part of that is crossing things off the list. I think less is more. And not it's not the easiest of exercises. And that's one of those tensions in those challenges that I'd be lying to you if I told you that our product roadmap hasn't evolved quite a bit over the last few years as we've learned and gotten feedback and really try to listen to the market. And I think for us and, some of those early models and assumptions you build on what we can tackle and do well, I think where that's led us and positioned us. And when I think about, the opportunity ahead of us, listen, there are going to be, new markets that we'll enter for, with existing commodities we work on. For example, like broccoli, we're just about to launch in Canada. We've been working in other growing regions. So there's kind of the new market expansion. There's also going to be new commodities. And so I think myself, the team and our partners get excited about that, but also I think it's really rallying the troops around this idea of really going deep with our partners. I feel like we're really just like scratching the surface on the potential we have together, and I think that's where as you kind of peel back those layers, that kind of initial problem statement we had and kind of what we set out to do, I found that going deeper with in some of those spaces with those partners, new ideas kind of come to life. And I think for us, that's a path where we can, continue to approach this in a very measured way in terms of the growth of our team, still showing up for and delivering that on those, let's say, customers' expectations of service and innovation. So we don't lose that spirit of innovation, but it's with a real focus on execution. And again, I think that has been probably one of my biggest learnings, even for myself, just maturing from what is certainly that allure, that startup company, it's got a sexy ring to it, to a much more like, say, acting like and looking like and operating like a much more established company in the spirit of sustainability, I think. So I think, your KPIs change, the questions you ask change internally, what you recognize with your team changes as leaders. Like, you have to ask the right questions. And I think really importantly, you have to model the behavior. I am a big believer in, leading by example. And so I'm very much looking in the mirror or the screen as I'm saying this. And so I think all those things are important.
Matt, you've been in the space for over a decade in food waste and sustainable ag. Would love to get your opinions on any contrarian views or hot takes you have.
Yeah. Tim, I think just my nature is to be a challenger. I think much to like my wife's chagrin and always kind of asking that question, why do we have to do it that way? I mean, I think one of my favorite quotes, is the most dangerous phrase in our language is, "This is the way it's always been done." So for me, this is like something that I think about quite often. I think in this space, I would say there's two things. I could probably give a long list, but I'll whittle it down to two for you here. One, and I don't know, maybe this would surprise you, but I think to say the waste basket is in fact not our best friend. I think, believe it or not, there is still a prevailing sentiment that, like, how do I grow my business? Well, if people, throw away more, then there's an opportunity for me to sell them more and thus grow my business. And I think that maybe that's a little bit more antiquated a view of the past, but listen, we still run into that. So I have to call that out, not just in the context of like food waste, like we were discussing. And I think really where the industry is going, I think where consumers are demanding, and just like as a society, species on this planet, I think we're well served to do that. So the waste basket may in fact not be our best friend. I think that is to say quality matters, and I think especially that second moment of truth. Not so much like the first moment buying it, the produce in the store, but at home cutting it open, or not just at home, even at like the table at the restaurant. I think that that second moment of truth is really important. And listen, then the pie gets bigger, for everyone. So I think that's one. And then the second one I would offer, guys, is that agriculture, farming is not a boring industry. I think, in fact, it's increasingly high tech and really primed for innovation. And I think that for a lot of reasons, but I think there's just a new set of knowledge and domains that we have the opportunity to integrate and kind of consider in this space. And so I'm maybe saying that as a call to kind of all the bright minds out there that are looking at ag versus industry XYZ. I just think continuing to attract the best and brightest minds to this space, I think really gives me hope for the future. And I have certainly found that to be the case with this, and maybe a little bit, to my surprise, but trying to spread the word on that as best I can.
Matt, as we kind of finish up here, you've been in food waste, you've been exposed to a lot of food and agriculture. If you weren't doing this, like what are some other ideas? Like what would you be working on if you weren't focused on food waste? Any kind of ideas in the ag sector that come to mind?
I have to say,
we know you're not going to cut it as a farmer, so you got to find something.
I know.
Else.
I was going to say, Tim, Lord knows my wife, she would fire me in a second. I'm lucky to kind of have my weekend job as a farmhand. Although it's nice to get dirt on the fingernails. You kind of at least for me, staring at a computer screen, flying around. It's nice to kind of get out there and get some dirt under the fingernails every once in a while. I don't know what it is. Maybe because I'm getting older, but I think I find myself like increasingly drawn to ideas that are a little bit more like below the radar, like less sexy, just kind of the inputs that drive efficiency not necessarily the big unicorn, big idea. And so like an example of that, not so much in ag, is I kind of halfway joke with my friends, is like billboards, like getting into that space, which like sounds cool to me. But again, like not very sexy, below the radar. I think within food and ag, I think more on the kind of sexier, trendier end of the spectrum. Data, AI, and that feels maybe a little bit cliche almost. But it's hard to ignore that. Just the statistics, like 90% of the data that has been generated in just the last 2 years, for us here. I think if it were to be that space, I've always been quite fascinated in leveraging quality data, with some of these new models to build predictive models of freshness for perishable commodities. So, something in that kind of data space as it relates to quality and freshness. And then maybe I'll give you guys one more that you might say it's a stretch, but it's still in food and beverage. I kind of love the idea of maybe just more of a pet project, starting a cocktail bar where you have the choice of, with or without alcohol. So no difference, simple menu. You don't have like the awkward like mocktail kind of square in the corner that tastes terrible, but it's all your kind of quintessential drinks, giving people a choice. I think it hits on some of the trends in health and everything. So I've been doing a little, let's say, kind of formulation work at home just to try to dial that in, but I got a long way to go.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of tailwinds with that one. The no alcohol or reduced alcohol is definitely picking up some seams to like making a business there. I think would be pretty spot on right now. Well, Matt, this has been a ton of fun. It was great to reconnect with you and catch up with you on the latest. As we wrap up, how can listeners get in touch and connect with you and Verdant?
Yeah, I would love to hear from folks, their ideas, comments. I'm on LinkedIn, so DM me there. Let's connect, and I look forward to doing so.
So, Tim, what do you think of that conversation with Matt?
Super fun conversation. It was cool learning more about their business and their HarvestHold product. And I think just interesting talking about kind of value creation in this space where in sustainability and food waste, everyone wants this. And it's really hard to figure out how to monetize this and where to attribute value, as every supply chain is so unique. Is this product going on a 1-day trip to the grocery store or a 10-day trip to the grocery store? And freshness and perishability have huge impacts in those supply chains. So having kind of a nuanced context approach is appropriate, but also challenging when you're talking to investors where they want uniformity and a kind of a consistent model. And so I think they're threading the needle there when they're looking at their different products.
Guys, I hope you enjoy your week of 4th of July. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you're not already. Follow us on social media, on YouTube. We're there. Wherever you need us, we're there. And also, check out our membership community if you want to join a group of builders in agriculture, the Modern Acre Co-op. The link is in the show notes for more info. We'll talk to you next time.